Y estamos aquí con el autor de un libro que me parece que puede ser uno de los libros más interesantes que se haya escrito a nivel de historia policíaca. The Grave Above the Grave. Tenemos aquí al excomisionado de la policía de la ciudad de Nueva York, el señor Bernard Kerick. Gracias por estar con nosotros. And let me ask you something right away. I saw the book on Amazon as Bernie B. Kerick. Is that how you're gonna?
No.
Are you gonna go now?
No, it's Bernard Kerick. It's
why did they do it? Bernie B. Kerick.
I don't know. There's people are already trying to sell the book in a different way and all this other stuff. I don't know.
Why don't we buy a book from Bernie?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I'm kidding, Commissioner. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
It's amazing. I was reading Sylvester Stallone wrote one of the comments of your book, and I completely agree with him. He says that no one has a better point of view than you to write these kind of police stories.
Well, listen, I lived through 9/11. Right? I was in command of the NYPD on September 11th. I had 55,000 people under my command, 41,000 uniformed officers. Dealt with the aftermath of 9/11. President Bush sent me to Iraq to take over the Ministry of Interior in 2003.
So I'm sorry, can we stop there? You were part of the reorganizing of the police there?
Reconstituting the interior. Basically,
how tough was that?
Well, listen, when Saddam fell, the entire government fell. So it was up to the CPA, the Coalition Provisional Authority, to come in and try to reconstitute and restand up those bodies. But what a lot of people won't know, they don't know if they've never looked into my background. From 1980 to 1982 and from 78 to 80, I actually lived and worked in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and I worked for the royal family. From 2005 to 2009, I worked privately and personally as an advisor to the King of Jordan. So
that's an incredible experience for that.
So I've been in the Middle East for 10 years. Worked in the Middle East for 10 years in an arena where I got to see a lot of the threats that we face in this country close up and personal.
Oh, wow. Was like what, for example? What was the most impacting for you?
I think one of the most crazy in my eyes was November 9th of 2005. Mm-hmm. I had just come back from Jordan. I just got home. I used to go every month. I actually went to Jordan 43 times in 36 months.
Oh, wow.
So I would go every month. I came home.
It's like going to work for you.
Going to work. So I came home one night, and my wife woke me up about 6 o'clock in the morning, and she said, "The king's brother is on the phone. He needs to talk to you ASAP." So I get on the phone, and he said, "Listen, there was a bombing last night." And I just left.
Wow.
He said there was a bombing last night, and His Majesty wants you to come back to Jordan. And 4 terrorists had gone into the Days Inn, the Grand Hyatt in the Radisson, and suicide bombers detonated their vest, killed a bunch of people. One of them, a female, got away. Her vest didn't explode, didn't detonate. She left. And I was actually there when she was captured and spoke to the debriefers that sat with her. And, this is the mindset of the enemy that the people in this country don't get, right? This is a woman that felt it was justified to go into a ballroom in a hotel and mass murder dozens of people because she didn't like the fact that there were women and men dancing that weren't married.
Oh, wow.
She didn't like, the freedoms that we have. She didn't like a bunch of different stuff. But
they just put in jail a lady that was having lunch with a work mate, just having lunch because they were not married. And boom, she's in prison now.
Yeah, I mean, it's wrong. It's crazy. But you have people out there, as the King of Jordan would say, these are outlaws of Islam. I'm not talking about every Muslim. Muslims, in my eyes, are good people. There's a lot of great Muslims out there. The King of Jordan is a friend. He's a devout Muslim, a law-abiding man. He despises this threat. He despises these people that basically have hijacked the Quran and they use it for their own political means. But the scary thing for us is they strongly believe, that if you don't worship the same God they do in the same way, then they have a God-given right to kill you.
That's crazy. But the Quran says similar things.
Similar things, but here's the problem. You know, just like the Bible says similar things, or things that we don't do today, right? We've gotten away from some of the strictest things in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
You take a moderate position. Moderate Muslims in this country are great people. But you have fanatics, lunatics, that take the strictest writings of the Quran, and they believe that. So they believe that they can kill gays. They believe that they can, it's okay to have sex with, like, your children or something.
Wow.
It's
just difficult
insanity.
That these people are there, and it's funny because if you think about it, what they're trying to be within their beliefs is better people,
right,
by following these rules. But it's crazy that in this day and age, I'm not religious at all, I'm an atheist, but whoever is religious, they're following rules that were written 400, 1,000 years ago.
Yeah,
that's
Listen,
crazy. That's their guide. So
here's how I try to explain it to Americans, and people I know. Right, the guys in this room. Right, you have kids. Right. At what point would your wife or the mother of your child believe that it's okay to strap a suicide pack on your child and send them into a mall, send them into a wedding, send them into a school? And then, after that kid does that and dies, the mother turns around and says, my next son is going to do the same thing.
Oh, wow.
That's some sick craziness.
Yeah, indoctrination. She grew up, she doesn't know anything else. Because for us, that's the most ridiculous thing ever.
So that's kind of the enemy that we deal with. Yeah. And in the book, The Grave Above the Grave, I tried to outline a series of threats and things that I believe. People always say to me, do you think there's going to be another 9/11? No, I don't. I don't think they have the ability to fly 4 planes into towers like they did on September 11th. But I do believe, and I strongly believe this, and it's already kind of worked itself out. Orlando, San Bernardino, Boston, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and others. We've seen lone wolves. We've seen, husband and wife teams
taking the fight.
Taking the fight to the infidel, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay. What happens on Monday afternoon at 1 p.m. if you have 5 two-man shooter teams in 5 different cities in this country walk into elementary schools and assassinate a bunch of kindergarten kids?
Correct.
That will annihilate the psyche of this country. It would have the catastrophic impact like September 11th. And Osama bin Laden used to say, these attacks must be spectacular. Yeah. That was a word he used. 9/11 was spectacular, okay?
But nothing beats children.
But this would be spectacular. It doesn't have to be 4 planes. Wow. So in the book, what I've tried to do is I've tried to give the reader a view of what's in my head, how I live, what I think about. When people say, what are you concerned with?
Yeah.
Those are my concerns.
What's the basic plot of the book?
The book is imagine this, it's a New York City police commissioner. It's a fictional character, naturally, but he, on 9/11, he was actually the precinct commander for the first precinct that covers the towers. Okay. So he had to respond to that.
All right.
And in the middle of responding to that, he finds out that his wife was on one of the planes that went down.
Oh, wow.
So he lost his wife, he lost his comrades, had to deal with the aftermath of 9/11 as a captain.
Yeah.
17 years later, he's the police commissioner. And the book opens with a scene in Times Square, and this is the only thing I'm going to give you. There's a scene in Times Square where he gets called at 2 a.m. by his chief of staff, and I've received many of these calls. His chief of staff says, we got 2 cops shot in Midtown, Times Square. Yeah. One's dead. one's critical. And the book starts out from there. And the suspect in that case is a radical extremist, and it leads him on a journey throughout the U.S. and around the globe.
Oh, wow. That's really freaking cool.
It's good.
And when you're writing it, you're trying to keep it real. If this situation happened, this is what I would do, kind of thing.
Well, what I did is I took it from, look, this is stuff I know, right? So I put it in a position where the reader will understand their mentality, their ideology. How do they communicate? How do they get around us? Some of that stuff is in there. How do we track them? How do we counter what they're doing? You know, many years ago, I should say, I worked in the Drug Enforcement Administration, and I worked on some of the top Cali cartel cases in the U.S. And this stuff reminds me of that. You know, when the cartels were working their way into this country and, you know, trying to get tons of cocaine into the U.S., you know, every week they came up with a new way to maneuver, a new way to communicate. You know, if we figured out, I remember when we could get up on a hardline phone, we could wiretap a hardline, but you couldn't wiretap a cell.
Yeah, it's difficult.
So they went to cells. Then we could wiretap a cell. Then they went to pagers, and then we went to pagers, and then, you know, so it's this constant one-step battle.
The tunnels thing, it's fascinating. I mean, they buy a mansion in a nice neighborhood, and I guess after months of activity, some neighbors say, listen, there's like weird people coming in, or, you know, this is a nice neighborhood and whatever, and they come in and out, and it seems like nobody lives there. And they have a freaking tunnel entrance there. It's crazy.
Oh, no,
submarines.
You know, back in the day, you know, in the heyday of the cartels, especially coming into New York City, you know, Dix Hills, Queens, right? We had a bunch of cases out there, and in the end, when we finally take these cases down, and you'd hit a house, and the house would be in a cul-de-sac, and it would be a gorgeous house.
Yeah.
We'd interview the neighbors, and they'd say, "No, it's a very nice couple. They have 2 kids. He goes to work every day. He comes home at the same time every night. You know, they get, you know, all the normal mail in the mail. The wife walks the kids to school." In the house, there's nothing in the house but beds. In one room is designated for drugs.
Wow.
Like you may have a ton, you may have 2 tons of cocaine.
And these couple, they're just employees.
They're just employees. They basically, they have no idea what's going on other than to receive and distribute what they, you know, have guys come in and pick up what they have. They have a closed garage. The guy pulls into the garage. They load. They could pull out of the garage. Nobody has no idea what's going on. So that's kind of what was going on at the time.
They have used dead babies to carry drugs to bring it into the country. The other day they arrested a real nun that had cocaine on her shoes.
Yeah. Listen,
and,
you know, it's
in body implants.
You'd be shocked at some of the ways this stuff gets.
You know, Commissioner, it is, and I say this sincerely. It is a shame that you didn't get to be Homeland Security. You know, the head of Homeland Security, because you have incredible experience, especially at the time that all these, you know, happened, and how much we needed somebody that really knew what they were doing. And
I think
you worked there before all this happened. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's a combination of a couple things. One, I had the experience, but 2, I had enormous successes in the New York City jail system at Rikers. No one prior to me and no one after me has ever been able to tame Rikers. When I came into Rikers Island, we averaged 133,000 inmate admissions per year.
Wow.
We also averaged 150 stabbings and slashings per year. Our daily population was about 22,400 inmates.
Yeah.
When I left and became New York City's police commissioner 6 years later, we had 1 stabbing that month. We dropped that number by 93%.
How did you?
Well, first and foremost, you can't have inmates in a prison or jail system that believe it's a criminal haven for criminal activity. So we had people getting stabbed and slashed and cut, and people throwing feces and urine in the face of COs and other inmates, and they were never charged with a crime. But if you stepped outside of that facility and you did the same exact thing in the street, you'd be charged with a crime.
Of course. So why in there is...
I don't know why they weren't doing it at the time, but I thought it was ridiculous. I had a conversation with the Bronx District Attorney, pushed for charges, and started holding the inmates accountable for their stupidity, their criminal conduct. We also started searching aggressively, taking the weapons out of the facility. You create incentives for the inmates to do a good job and to be better. There's a bunch of things we did that people initially said, it's too big, can't be handled, can't do it. It's never going to happen. You're never going to do it, and we did it. It reminds me of the Renaissance of New York City when Rudy Giuliani came in 1994, and they said, it's never been cleaned up. It's only gotten worse. It's too big. It's too disorganized. It's too dirty, and it's too crime-ridden.
So that's basically unfixable.
That's exactly right. It's unfixable. And here's, if you bring that to present day today, right? You have Chicago, Baltimore, St. Louis, Milwaukee, and a number of other urban cities around the country that are in the same position we were in 1994. In 1994, we had over 2,000 murders in New York City.
Wow.
Those cities today are having the same issues, same problems. And the people in those communities, their complaint is that it's all about poverty. It's poverty. It's socioeconomic issues. It's racial division. They have 100 excuses why it is the way it is, and that's what you have to do to fix it. You have to fix those things to make it better.
Because how do you fix poverty?
But I'm going to tell you something. They're all wrong. And I'm going to tell you why they're wrong. I'm a business owner, right? I have business. I want to bring business to a community.
Yeah.
Am I going to take business into a community or create jobs in a community where nobody's going to come to live or work or visit or go to school where they don't feel safe?
Of course not.
Giuliani, when he came in 1994, he said, you know what, guys? The poverty's, it's correct. We got major poverty issues in black communities in New York City and Latino communities, right? Horrible, horrible stuff going on, bad stuff. But nobody's going to come there. Nobody's going to change Harlem if there's constant gunfire in Harlem. So first and foremost, before we do anything else, we're going to reduce crime. And that was his mission for the first 2 to 3 years. And for every percentage point, in the end, by the time we left, for every percentage point we reduced crime, we saw increases in economic development, real estate value, tourism, reductions in welfare rolls, better educational standards. The entire city changed. There was a renaissance. That's what these other cities around the country have not learned yet.
So Harlem's getting white.
Not only, listen, I don't think Harlem's getting white, but it's getting a lot of Chinese, and it's getting like, they have these tours, I go up there to see friends at the 26 Precinct, and it's like, they have like bus tours of people coming into Harlem. Like, would anybody have imagined that 25 years ago?
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's what you're saying. If you reduce crime, then people are more open
People
to...
will come. People will come.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first went to major case in narcotics, our unit was in the 26 Precinct on 126th Street. And I could remember my first or second day there, standing in front of the precinct. Within 30 minutes, we were all out there laughing, joking, and doing stuff. I heard gunfire like 3 or 4 times, and the cops there were like, "Yeah, that's like over here, that's over here, that's over there."
Yeah,
I'm like, it's right down the street, and I'm like, "Wow, this is crazy."
It's like
it was like a combat zone. Washington Heights, Harlem, Spanish Harlem, bad places.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s and 80s, and then post Giuliani, it was like Times Square was like Times Square was like Disneyland.
But how do you motivate your police force to be more aggressive, or not more aggressive, but more hands-on with those? I mean, do you increase resources?
Well,
do you
listen.
put more?
Okay, that's a good point, because the first thing you have to do, you can't ask someone to do a job for you if you're not going to give them the resources they need to do the job, right? So as correction commissioner, when I took over Rikers, I told the mayor, I said, look, one of the things I need, I need more emergency service personnel. And, I need to send guys for training. I need guys to learn how to search. I need guys to learn how to respond to problems in the jails. And the emergency service team at Rikers, it was kind of comical sometimes. I'd have visitors come from other facilities around the country, and they would see these guys walking through a facility, and they'd say, is any one of these guys like under 6'5"? You have anybody under 6'5"?
Yeah, it was scary.
And I said, listen, when you're sending a team of 5 or 6 guys into a cell with a guy that's on the other side of the cell who's got a cup of urine in one hand and a handful of feces in the other, this isn't playtime. Dude, you're coming out, or we're coming to get you, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be nice. So you need the right people to do this.
That is crazy. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I read a story this week. An officer in Wisconsin had to kick in the door, to get a suspect from the bathroom. And what she did, as soon as he came in, she bent over and shot feces at him from, the hole.
Dude,
right? I'm saying, what a freaking day for somebody to wake up and say, let's see if anybody shits on me today. That's crazy.
You ain't seen nothing.
What a job.
You ain't seen nothing. I've seen things at Rikers. I literally, one time they called me. They said, Commissioner, we're coming down. We have 2 videos we want you to see. They came out of punitive segregation, where they hold the worst inmates. Oh, wow. And they said one inmate got out of his cell. And I said, he got out of his cell. How did he get out of his cell? They cracked the door. They left the door open. They said, no, watch. We're going to show you the video. The other one, we're actually bringing the guy downtown. We're going to introduce him to you. He's going to show you something. So they show me the video. In the video, a guy basically takes Vaseline, and he Vaselines up his whole body. And one step at a time, he sticks his head through the feeding slot, which is only I swear it's only this big. Gets his head, gets his arm, comes forward like this.
Wow.
He slid through the feeding slot like a snake.
Through the feedings. That's where they put the tray.
Listen, the feeding slot, I swear it's only it's 8 inches by like a foot or something. Right?
Wow.
And he went right through the feeding slot and wound up running around the COs at Rikers will tell you they've seen
You
stuff.
probably saw a rat do it, because that's what rats do. They kind of, if they can feed their head, the rest of the body goes.
So they bring this other inmate downtown. We were having problems with slashings and stabbings, and we're trying to get rid of weapons. And they bring a guy down. They have him in a conference room. I walk in. They introduce me. And they said, okay, go ahead. Show him. And he reaches into his mouth. And he pulls a piece of floss. You do floss on your teeth. He takes the piece of floss, which is tied to his tooth, and he pulls the floss. And as he's pulling it, there are razor blades attached to the floss that he has actually swallowed.
Oh, my God.
And he pulls them out of his mouth. And you're standing there thinking, okay, how do we find? How do you find this?
How do you check somebody in the?
Listen, and honestly, that was one of the things. That was one of the success stories, if you will, during my time. I bought these chairs. They're called the Boss chair, the body orifice scanner, and you sit in it.
Oh wow!
And it tells you if there's something up your rectum, if there's something in your throat, if there's
crazy.
something in your mouth.
Why wasn't this being used? That's amazing.
Well, this goes back to what I'm saying about having a mayor, having somebody in charge that's going to give you the resources to do the job.
Do you think de Blasio has allowed the police to get disrespected? I mean,
Yeah.
Because after 9/11, the NYPD, you were the boss there at the time, but the NYPD got amazing respect. I mean, I remember people like going like that to police officers. And,
well, listen, there's a reason for that, though, and it's a big reason. And I think sometimes people lose sight of it. And in the aftermath of the attack, okay, I want you to think about this from a numbers perspective. And I try to promote this around the country. I was just in Nashville with Charlie Daniels. I did a military charity, and I spoke there, and I reminded the people in the audience, on that day, on September 11th, the men and women, the first responders of New York City, effected the greatest and most substantial rescue mission in the history of the country. They took 20 to 25,000 people out of the buildings and out of the immediate area, but more importantly, they evacuated more than 1 million people, more than 1 million people out of Manhattan into the 4 boroughs.
Yes.
And into New Jersey with the help of the New Jersey State Police. It's never been done before.
In a couple of hours? I mean,
in 4 hours, 5 hours.
Wow.
So it was unparalleled in our time. Hopefully it never has to happen again. But that talks about the resources that the New York City has, whether it's the NYPD. I had 55,000. The New York City Fire Department had 13,000. The Correction Department, we used COs. They had 13,000, plus Port Authority Police had thousands. So you could do this, but there was a reason that people came out and supported the NYPD at that time because, people, listen, when people are scared to death, they call 911. These are the men and women that come, and they don't give a damn what color your skin is, or whether you're a male, female, gay, straight. It doesn't make any difference. You call 911, they're coming. And on that day, they came in a bigger way than ever before.
In history.
Definitely.
What do you think about body cams?
I think they're good. I have no problem with them. I think, I was one of the first guys in a major department to put the cameras in the highway cars, right, the patrol cars. I don't see a problem with body cams. I think, and I think the cops, once they're through 1 or 2 incidents where it vindicates them and it shows that they were doing the right thing, that they did what they were supposed to, and we've had many since the body cams were put out. We've had many incidents where you have career politicians that have basically lied and got caught lying.
That's right.
This guy said this, and he did this, and this guy stalked me, and this guy said,
There was a woman saying, "Do you know who I am? I am a..."
Oh, right, exactly. And they go back to the cameras, and what do they find? They find they're full of it, and that's not what happens. So.
Do you have any ideas how to deal with the MS-13, which is one of the worst and most difficult things probably happening right now?
Listen, MS-13, there's no difference between them and a bunch of the other gang activity that we've had in this country, but you need mayors and governors that have the cojones to go out and do what they're supposed to do. You got to stop these guys from coming into the country. You got to do something about the borders. You got to do something about the sanctuary city stuff. I have no problem with legal immigration. I encourage legal immigration. My wife was born in Syria. She came here legally. My mother's my son's mother was born in Cuba. She came here legally. I have no problem with legal immigration, but when you're letting people come into this country, you have no accountability for them. You have no way to monitor them. I think that's a problem, and nobody knows better than I do what happens when the wrong people get into the country. On the MS-13 front, they got to go after these guys. They have to go after them hard. They have to do it federally. They have to work, and this is where the downfall is for local municipalities, because they don't like the president. They don't ask for resources.
No. Really?
Okay. Yes.
That makes him look good somehow?
Listen, the president went out to Long Island. I was there.
Yeah.
The president went to Long Island to talk about MS-13 and basically encourage the locals, the police, the county police, and others to go after these guys, right? And he's going to give them federal money to do this through the Department of Justice. And what happens? Every political leader that was in the towns where they were most impacted, they wouldn't come to the event because it was the president.
That makes no sense.
You know what? I don't care if you like the guy, you don't like the guy. Mm-hmm. Use the government for what you can, and they should create federal task forces. The FBI, the DEA, ATF, the U.S. Marshal Service, in conjunction with the state police and local police. I promise you, I've done this. See, the problem with on the communications front, you can't debate me on this stuff. I've done it. And I've done it in a way that's been unparalleled. It's been, nobody's ever done it before. Nobody's done it since. We reduced violent crime by 65 to 70%. We reduced murder by 70 to 75%. In some of the black communities in New York City, almost 80% of a reduction in homicide. Wow. That's thousands of black and Latino lives saved during the Giuliani years. Don't tell me it can't be done. It can be done if you have somebody in charge that's going to do what has to be done.
And it's funny because in the case of MS-13, I mean, how many criminals have labels on their skin saying, "Hey"?
Well, it's not like they're not. It's not like they're not easily identifiable.
Exactly.
I mean, come on, these guys. Some of these guys, like, it's completely whacked out. When you see them, you're like,
the whole face.
Look, I get why they're a problem. You're never going to get a job with a thing running across your forehead and these tattoos all over.
Yeah, the only thing you can be if you change your ways is activist. To work with them. This is our friend Pedro over here. He's one of our shows.
I have a show on the network. Hi, Mr. Kerick.
How are you?
My pleasure, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Kerick was a trainer for the Iraq forces, right?
Yeah.
After the 9/11 situation, we took over, and then But on that front that you are talking about, how we get hurt, the good Latinos, our good Latinos that live in the messed up communities. I keep telling people how funds are lost due to this fight that local government, due to politics, are starved with the federal authority. Can you explain? Because you have a little bit more credibility than me. Because I am the most hated person in this network. just for your information.
He's our Bill O'Reilly.
Listen, that's a really good point. And I actually did this, and I forget. Oh, I did it for Puerto Rico. Okay. When they had the hurricanes in Puerto Rico. And everybody was bashing the president and the federal government. Not so much the president, but the federal government and FEMA and everybody else. And I did a YouTube, and I said, guys, listen. I said, I know you may not like this. I said, but it's not the federal government's responsibility. It's the local governments. It's the mayors and the state leaders. It's their job to put together the crisis response, the rescues, and all that stuff. The federal government is supposed to come in and augment or help you. They're going to give you resources that you may not need. But listen, if I'm in the federal government, and I'm in, say I took over Homeland, or I was in FEMA, and I go to you as a community, and you tell me we need ABC, and I give it to you, and then you mismanage what I give to you, or you just squander it away, or you have corruption, and some of that stuff just disappears. Don't blame me. You got to go
like they do.
Like they do. You got to go after those local leaders, and you got to hold them accountable. And a lot of that just isn't done. But you're 100% right. And
in Puerto Rico, what really hurt was the unions. They didn't want to move none of the stuff, and they're the only ones. They're the only ones that had access
at the pier.
Yeah, at the pier.
And listen, my son is actually a detective in Newark, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. He's been on the job for about 13, 14 years. He's been on the SWAT team there for about 10, I think. He's assigned to the FBI Joint Terrorist Task Force in Newark, the Newark Field Division. He went to Puerto Rico, and he was there for, I think, 2 months maybe, on one of the rescue things. And he called me, and he said, Dad, I don't know what's going on back there. He said, don't tell me they don't have resources. He said, they got tons of stuff here. He said, but the locals, they don't even have enough. They don't have enough coordination to get their own people to distribute it.
The level of chip.
It's unbelievable.
I sent my parents a power plant, and it took 4 months to get to them.
No, listen, guys. It's just crazy. You cannot blame. It reminds me though of New York City prior to Giuliani. Blame everybody else. Blame the government. Blame the feds. Blame whoever. They don't care. You know what? You have to have some personal responsibility. You have to take responsibility for what you. And these are sworn political leaders.
Elected officials.
It's your job. Sure. It's your job. That's your job. Do your job. We're not asking you to do anything more.
Nothing personal. Just do what you were selected to do. And on that front, in 1994, your boss, Mr. Rudolph Giuliani, implemented what's today mayor like Mr. Bill de Blasio is enjoying under 300 murders a year. So that you think ComStat, which is the policy that the police department implemented in order to bring all this murder, is a policy. Allow me to elaborate just a little bit. They target communities where the crime was flourishing. Through these comparing statistics, which is what ComStat is meaning.
Right.
So you think a policy like that wouldn't be able to be implemented if Bill de Blasio would have been the mayor back in 1994?
No.
With today's municipal council?
No.
Impossible, right?
It would not have happened.
Because such policy targets community for their crime, for their criminal activity.
Not only that it targets community, you have to be in a position of mindset as the mayor that you're going to have internal accountability for, what goes on, right? ComStat was created so we could look at crime on a daily basis. Statistically, police agencies around the country used to look at crime quarterly, right, or biannually. If I get a report every 3 months on crime stats,
obsolete.
It's antique. Exactly. Forget about it.
Exactly.
You've got to know. So I'll give you an example of the difference. I used to get my car every morning at 6 a.m. I physically stepped into my car at 6. At 5 after 6, the mayor called my car every morning. This guy, he doesn't get up to 11. but or whatever. I don't know. He's got issues.
10:30.
Whatever. Giuliani, 5 after 6, would call my car, and he would say, first thing out of his box, anything out of the blue, any spikes in crime. Because sitting next to me is a thick folder, with everything that went on in the city yesterday.
Wow.
So by 5:30, 6 o'clock, I have that folder. Giuliani at 5 after 6, he wants to know what happened. Any spikes, anything I should know. And then, which used to drive me crazy, by the time he calls me at 5 after 6, he already read every newspaper because he'd say, there's a quote by an anonymous somebody in the New York Times on page 7.
Wow.
Who is that?
It has everything to
That's
do
what
with
you mean when you say that it's a matter of disposition,
It's all about accountability,
Of course.
So,
and it has everything to do with the fact that Mr. Giuliani was a federal prosecutor. The guy and has make a living out of fighting crime. But
you know what he also did? He took principles of business and brought them into the city, right? There's a book called Reinventing Government. It was written by a guy named David Osborne. And in that book, it's all about accountability, business accountability. And basically, Osborne used to say, what gets measured gets done. I can't go fix something if I don't know what's broken.
You don't know what's going on. That happened when he went to the Dominican Republic. He was invited there to help the Dominicans fight crimes back in the island.
Right.
And he have to walk away because we don't keep statistics there.
Right.
Yeah, so how is he going to know he's fighting?
Conveniently.
No, well,
Conveniently, government don't keep statistics.
Yeah.
Because it can fight back.
Listen, in New York City, we kept statistics for everything. Now, it started with ComStat. Then it went to the New York City Department of Correction under me. That's how I was able to reduce the violence in the jail system. Then it went to health and hospitals. Then it went to personnel. Then it went to every single agency. Every agency had it. By the time we left, 8 years, every agency had an accountability program where you monitored what was going on, right down to homeless. Right down to homeless. And the worst part...
The broken window policy.
The broken windows policy, which people, it's too aggressive, it's too assertive, it's too this. Do you want to live in poverty and slums? Do you want to live in violence? If that's the way you want to live, get rid of the program.
Exactly.
Because that's what's going to happen.
I always say that lack of enforcement of a small crime, it's what keep criminal courts packed up.
Yeah.
In the Dominican Republic, we have a very little amount of civil cases in the court system in comparison to the criminal cases. You go to criminal court in the Dominican Republic and they are jammed with criminal cases.
Wow.
That happened in a system where civility failed due to lack of enforcement of civil law.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't enforce the guy who drink in public, the urinate in public. Eventually, that will degenerate into somebody killing somebody over somebody peeing.
People taking the justice.
But there's two issues. That's one issue. But the other issue is it completely drives down your real estate value,
quality of life,
your quality of life arena. Imagine you live in the West Village, right? You pay $5 million, $7 million, $10 million for a brownstone.
For a one bedroom.
For one. You buy this gorgeous building, and you come out in the morning, and there's somebody urinating in front of your thing when you're taking your kid to school.
Sleeping drunk in the steps.
Yeah, sleeping drunk in the steps, or masturbating in public, or whatever the case may be. That's what was going on prior to Giuliani taking over. And he basically said, look, you want to live in a civil society, you want to live in a clean environment, or you want to live in the slums, you want to live in poverty, you want to have the lowest economic development in the history of this country, then we'll leave it be.
Is the city at risk of going back to those times right now?
It's already going back to that.
It is already there, right?
Look, take a ride around New York City.
But crime, they bragging about crime.
Well, you know what's keeping crime down?
lowest.
You know what's keeping crime down? Jimmy O'Neill, who's the commissioner today, who's a good guy. I believe he's a good guy. He was probably a captain under my command, lieutenant. He was pretty far down the totem pole at the time. He's become commissioner, but he's lived through the ComStat process. He lived through the process of accountability. So he runs the NYPD now, and he has taken those programs, all the programs that we infused into the department, and Bloomberg carried on, and Bloomberg did phenomenal, right? Jimmy O'Neill's carried that on. But I'll show you how it's different under this administration.
But they don't give credit to the priors.
No, never.
Because
Never.
they even says that rape is up 38% in the city this year.
That's terrible.
And they said because of the environment we're living in, that women are now prone to denounce rapists. That's why rape is up, not because there are more rapists in the street.
Well, you have excuses for everything. I mean, you have to look at the cases individually. But you look at this. When you think of the overall leadership of the city, Mayor de Blasio kept the chiefs and the people in command of the NYPD. He kept them in from the PD.
Wow.
In the Department of Correction, they brought outsiders. You don't bring outsiders in. You don't bring a guy from Maine, who ran an entire system of 2,000 inmates, to stick them on Rikers in a system where you have 16,000 inmates and you have 13,000 staff members. he's a bit out of his league.
Not knowing the culture, not knowing nothing.
Nothing. And, and the thing imploded. They have half the population, the inmate population that I have, and the violence, the corruption, the mismanagement is completely out of control.
Yeah, sometimes people ask, citizens ask for change, and they rather get change from outside than from, downstairs, because you have people that...
Don't, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even new administrations come in and they want to leave their mark on something. Look, Bloomberg came in. He left his mark on the city. He left his mark on the NYPD by carrying on the policies, and the policies worked. And they worked so good that we went from 2,400 murders in 2000 down to, what are we at, 371 or
two something, 249.
Whatever the number is now. Yeah. That trend, that reduction in murder is one, historical, unparalleled, and never happened anywhere in this country in any city. Those numbers.
Since 1950.
Yeah. So it's...
well, let's hope it gets fixed. If it doesn't, you have the record of having the best run police force.
One question. I'm sorry, I know we're short on time. Have you been compensated for the 9/11 from the 9/11 funds of those who works on the affected areas?
No, I don't.
Why you not? If some people.
No,
They just walk by are getting money.
Yeah, I don't. I haven't requested anything. I don't intend to. Hopefully, I'm doing okay physically. I get a physical every 6 months. I've had some polyps. Things they had to get out of me. Cancer, pre-cancer stuff.
Really?
Hopefully it stays that way. I know a lot of people that work for me.
So you were affected physically, after that.
I think everybody in some way was affected.
$25 billion fund for those who work in the area.
But you have a lot of... You
don't even have to be part of the rescue.
You have a lot of people down there. You have a lot of people right now. You have first responders right now, close to 10,000, that have some illness related to the breathing, related to what was going on, the quality of the air. And I'm constantly battling with members of Congress. And this goes back to your question earlier. Don't ask these people to do a job and put their lives on the line and jeopardize their own personal safety if you're not going to back them up when it's over. And you have members of Congress that have denied them this program. You've got members of Congress that have just, gone to their own. They leave it alone, or they don't support it. I just think it's wrong.
Luis, he was harsh on Quentin Tarantino, your pal.
On Quentin Tarantino?
Yeah.
Why?
When he says that cops are murderers.
Tarantino said that?
Oh, Tarantino.
That's kind of irresponsible.
He's a kook.
It is irresponsible.
He was being interviewed by CNN, the commissioner.
Yeah.
And he,
you went up on the guy. Did he answer somehow? Did he reply to that?
No, he didn't get back to me, but...
call him a coward and everything.
Yeah. Listen, guys, I, in all honesty, don't get out there and talk all this yang and garbage and all this stuff when you would never have the balls to do what the men and women in the NYPD or some of these organizations would do. You just wouldn't. You'd never have the courage to do it. So don't get out there and talk all this junk, especially when you don't know what you're talking about. Don't create a false narrative. Don't, cops are out there abusing the black community and annihilating, wrongfully murdering black people and all this. I hear this stuff constantly, and it makes my head explode.
It was irresponsible on his part, especially because I guess what he was trying to do was kind of soften the fact that he just made a movie that said the N-word like 1,700 times.
Sure, he was trying to sell it.
His
18 million mansion, he sit on a chair and record a podcast.
It's okay when they do it, but I just, I hate that stuff. You know what? I have worked with And I was highly decorated in the NYPD, gun battles, and I've had partners shot and wounded and shot and killed and all this stuff. And I've commanded some of the bravest men and women in the history of this country. So I take it personal when somebody comes to me and says, you know, the opposite. That's all.
The Grave Above the Grave. Let me ask you something. Does Stallone has the rights for the film?
No, but if he wants to do it, listen, we're good.
Because it's funny, because a lot of authors, when they're used to just writing books and just with a book in mind, they say the chapter, this and that. You refer to your book as scenes. In this scene, and this, and I'm like already picturing as a movie.
We've already talked to some people in Hollywood. There's some producers. There's some other people that have contacted me that read the book. You never know where this stuff goes.
Does it make a compelling film?
My first autobiography, The Lost Son, came out in 2001. It was about my cop career, right?
Yeah.
That book was actually optioned 6 times.
Really?
You know, where it was purchased 6 times. You know what? Purchasing the rights, optioning the book is one thing. Getting it to production and getting something on the screen is a big, big different story.
I guess Hollywood's fun.
So
like
we'll see. We'll see.
Well, it has to be. And congratulations, because, I've heard great and read great comments about the book, and definitely no one has more insight into that kind of stuff than you do. Thank you for coming on the show, Commissioner.
Guys, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.